tell us a bit more about this concept of flow? I'm quite a pragmatic, sort of black and white kind of person, so it does sound a bit woo-woo to me.
We often don't realise just how much our belief system is actually impacting us, and often in quite a negative way as well. Identity is fundamentally like a blueprint essentially for how you live your life. It's so interconnected. So if you have a really strong hold on who you are and a true understanding of yourself, it impacts your beliefs, it impacts how you behave, it impacts the decisions that you make.
How do you draw the line between your own identity and what other people have I guess, taught you or imposed on you?
Even now you can be influenced by somebody. Is this something that somebody wants me to do, or is this
Muhami Matters with Chris Adams, powered by CJA Consulting.
Welcome to Muhami Matters, where credibility meets clarity in legal and professional services. I'm your host, as always, Chris Adams, founder of Muhami and CJA Consulting. Today, we're talking about something that most professionals experience, but very few consciously think about: identity. What happens when your role changes, when you're made redundant, when you move countries, when you step into leadership, or when you quietly realize the version of who you built your career on is not really the same person you are today? Joining me is Carina Harvey, interior designer, personal stylist, and identity advisor, whose journey from global corporate HR to creative entrepreneur has shaped a powerful framework around identity. She's also shaped that around decision-making and self-trust. Carina, welcome to Muhami Matters.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, you're most welcome. I appreciate you joining us. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Can you introduce yourself, share, I guess, the headline of your career journey so far? Because it's been very interesting.
I don't know how to do that. It's really hard. Purely because I feel like my career journey has obviously, as you know, gone in sort of very different directions. Obviously, as you said right now, so I'm an interior designer, a personal style and identity advisor. A number of different parts of my journey have kind of led me to this point now. To summarize it in a nutshell, and then obviously you can go into more detail if you so wish. But my background was in corporate. So
I like how you call yourself, by the way, a corporate girly.
That's what you described, a corporate girly. Yeah. So ex-corporate girly for many years, too many years, I don't care to mention. I started my career in recruitment in the 2000s, 8 years working in a very male-dominated role in the City of London. So you can imagine how that was. But I really enjoyed it. So did that for 7-8 years. It's pretty cutthroat, very competitive. Taught me an awful lot about working in a very sales-driven environment, really. But for me, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I always felt like working agency side in recruitment was very one-dimensional, in the sense that once you learn how to do your role, you start to build, you start to expand, maybe you start to manage some people, but you don't really change up your duties in any way. So I then started to explore what could I do, and that's when I moved in-house and I moved into the banking sector. And I started working in an in-house recruitment team, but it was a brand new recruitment team. So I was actually very fortunate in the sense that taught me a lot more about setting up the operations of a brand new team. Obviously having the demand, so we were an outsourced function as well, so having the demand of the client. And also having to get to know so I used to work for a global bank, having to get to know a very large matrixed, very complicated organisation structure. I then got headhunted to move internally into the bank, and I worked in several different roles. So this is where my more HR, talent, leadership focused career began. First job that I worked in was working in a global talent program. That was extremely interesting because I was working with some very interesting individuals, managing them on the program itself, managing the function and the efficiency, I guess, and the purpose of the program itself, but also dealing with the individuals from an HR perspective too. From a performance perspective, managing employee relation cases, of which many were very complicated. And from there on, I went into different HR related roles where I was managing different program streams that were feeding into global projects. So doing different things. I started to work in coaching a little bit there. So I started to design coaching programs as part of an overall project management team. And then, unfortunately, I got made redundant. So this was about having worked for that organisation for about 7 years. And I think at that time, obviously everything that I'd spoken about so far, I saw myself very much as this corporate career girl. It was a huge part of my identity. This is all still whilst I was living and working in London, running around on the tubes, all that kind of stuff. That was me. And then I got made redundant. That same year, I broke up with a very long-term partner, actually a husband who I would later come on to divorce. And so the two things combined really led me to making the decision of, okay, do you know what? I've always wanted to move overseas. Let's do it. So I did. So this is how I began my journey in the UAE. Sorry, you asked for the headlines. I did tell you this was going to be longer than just the headlines.
No, this is good. So you've gone from being a corporate girly in London, living, working around the square mile.
Yeah.
And you've gone from being in recruitment, outsourced, to being hired by the bank, moved over to finance. You're now working on global HR and talent programs. How did you feel at that point in time? On top of the world? Or, what made you then say, I want to leave London, I want to move overseas?
I think, so I'm a big believer in things happen to you for a reason. And obviously, like later on, I've studied different coaching modalities and I've gone way deeper into things like that. And so now I know for a fact that things happen to you for a reason, and every single thing, it doesn't actually happen to you, it happens for you. Everything is a learning opportunity. But even before all of that, I think I knew intrinsically that this was pointing me to something that I needed to do differently with my life. How did I feel about it? If we focus in on the redundancy, my career was something that I was incredibly proud of. And in the latter stages of, so if we talk about the second half of it, first half being recruitment, then moving in-house and then moving into the bank, this is where I was able to go back to school and I was able to study for a master's degree, which I had to write a business case for because I hadn't got a bachelor's at the time. So I'd gone through a number of different things as a teenager. I'd lost my mother very suddenly, at a very sort of critical stage of my life. It enabled me to do things and to move my career on in such a way that I had never really imagined that I would be able to. So I think I was extremely disappointed and I was probably a lot more hurt and a lot more upset than I chose to let on at the time. I was very much, right, let's pick myself up, let's get back on with it and figure out what we're going to do next. But I think the key thing for me then is that already with that one change, my identity had started to shift. And I actually wrote a post about this week or last week, in the sense of, so for me, my redundancy, it was almost, I liken it to like you go through a big breakup, huge breakup, and you say, right, I'm off women or I'm off men or whatever. And you then just dive straight back into the dating world because someone says to you, oh, you've got to do it, come on, dip your toe back in, and you don't assess why your first inclination was, right, that's it, I'm off of dating. You just go straight back in. You don't know what you want, you don't know who you're looking for, you're probably going to do it all wrong in the sense that you're going to give too much of yourself away, you're going to make the wrong choices, or not the wrong choices, but not the right choices for you. So I did that and I moved here to Dubai, which I will forever be grateful for in so many different ways. But my first thought, obviously, was let's go out and get a job. Yeah. And I don't think I'd realised that I'd started to transition my thinking away from the corporate world. So I think at the time, if you'd asked me, I would have said, yeah, brilliant, this has happened for a reason, it's taken me to Dubai. But I hadn't processed it in any way, which I then later learned that was a huge habit of mine throughout my entire life. So
Yeah, I think you've got to find a way to cope, don't you? So you had two massive changes in your life, with the divorce, obviously, and the redundancy, which are very personal things, and very, they could knock your self confidence quite a lot. So was Dubai for you all about change, a new start? Was that why you thought, I'm just going to leave the UK behind and start afresh?
yeah, I think so. Moving overseas was something that I'd always wanted to do, and actually, it was something that my ex-partner and I had discussed quite a lot in the first few years of our relationship. And then later, it sort of became very apparent that I don't think that he was ever very serious about that. And it's not the reason why we split up, but
No.
obviously, when we did split up, it kind of allowed me to go, "Ooh, this is back on the table." And then obviously, my redundancy happened 6 months, I think, after that. So yeah, I saw it very much as a not fresh start, but just a new opportunity to do something different, do something for me, do something that I'd always wanted to do. Um, it was actually my first year in Dubai was super, super challenging. It was one of the most challenging times of my life, actually, because I hadn't processed a lot of what had happened to me that year prior. I hadn't processed most things that had happened to me throughout my entire life, and I've been through various different things in my childhood, early adulthood. So a lot really caught up with me, but that was what led me to going on my own personal development journey. So as I said before, I'd started to do a little bit of coaching work in my last role working for the bank. And so I'd already started to delve into different coaching modalities. So then this became a personal point of interest for me. I worked with different coaches. I sought out therapy and just things that I needed to do, obviously, for myself. So yeah, and then I worked in a couple of different corporate jobs over here. The first job, so this is a prime example of what I mean about that identity transition and the comparison that I just gave to not exploring, not catching up with yourself, or not allowing yourself to catch up with that sort of mindset. I came over here, and the key thing for me was to get a job. And so I was focused in on sort of buzzwords, what was going to be strategic, what was going to enable me to work in the same capacity that I was in my last role. And I took a job that just wasn't right for me at all. So I started to make all of the wrong choices. I then was very confused about what I wanted to do, and I kept thinking maybe I want to go back to the UK. So yeah, it was just a real sort of state of confusion. Everything felt very uncomfortable. I was meant to be enjoying this amazing journey of living in Dubai, and actually I was sat there feeling extremely confused. I didn't really know what I was doing. So yeah, then
When you
sorry.
say, sorry to interrupt. So when you say
Yes.
you were meant to be enjoying that, where did that pressure come from? Where did that idea of I'm meant to be enjoying this? Was that pressure from yourself, pressure from your family, your friends, self expectations? What do you think that stemmed from?
So primarily, I would say pressure upon myself because it was something that I'd chosen to do.
Yes.
And I saw all of these things very much as my decision and my choice. Because even when I got made redundant from the bank, there was an opportunity to allow them to search for something else internally, as they do when they displace you. You have a period of time and they can look for other things. And I said, no, thank you, I'm going to go. What had happened with me and my ex, it was me that had made that call to say, this is the end of our relationship. And so I guess what I felt like everything should be working out perfectly for me.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd really developed much of a growth mindset, which now I have, and I hold to be extremely valuable, because I know that I could choose to do anything. And if it isn't quite right for me, I can now comfortably sit and say, this isn't right for me. It's not going in the right direction. Let's sit and have a look why. And if it's time to pause, if it's time to stop, then let's do that. At that time, I wasn't mature enough in that thinking. So everything was kind of my own pressure that I was placing on me. You've chosen to do this. This is amazing. Why are you not enjoying it? And then I'd say a little bit as well, because obviously, people back home will sit there and look at you in a country like Dubai and say, oh, well, surely you're just down the beach every day. And I think, again, if I was in a stronger mindset, I could have obviously turned around and said, well, I do have to work and it is a little bit harder, and it wouldn't have bothered me. But again, I was allowing it to bother me. So yeah, I think primarily the pressure was placed upon myself though.
Do you look
But
back and
again,
feel like you were a bit hard on yourself now?
definitely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, it's a pattern that emerges throughout my entire life, is that I've always been very hard on myself. I've always been my own worst critic. And again, that's why identity has played such a role when it comes to looking at all of that. Now I know myself incredibly well, and I know that I have always been my world's worst critic. I can't say it, world's worst critic. I still can't say it. But and so just learning to understand that and learning where that comes from. NLP, which you're suddenly familiar with, I think.
Yeah, I'm getting more
You
familiar
know,
with it. We
yeah.
did do a podcast with Sarah Habibi a couple of weeks ago
Okay.
that talked a bit about NLP. But yeah, it's interesting you've explored that as well.
Yeah. So, and that was a huge part. So I've done, I think I told you, I'm a practitioner. I've actually done all of my masters, but I need to do my exam to actually officially say that I'm a master as well. But that teaches you to be able to look back at your life and understand, where did these behaviours come from? Where did these beliefs come from? And start to work through the process of reframing and essentially disproving the belief that you have built up in your head. So this was a really big part for me, is the fact that I am, or was, very critical of myself. Now I have a lot more self-care. I have a lot more self-love. So, and again, if you apply that with a growth mindset, then, you know that nothing is ever a mistake. But I think at that time, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. I'd made these decisions. And so to me, it felt like it had to work, But again, then you're just blocking out the noise. So I was then just blocking out the fact that actually there's some deeper stuff here that you need to take a look at, which obviously eventually I did.
Yeah, so you've now moved to Dubai. You've decided to do NLP. You've decided to make you've made very conscious decisions all the way along, I've got to say.
It didn't
And
feel like that at the time.
yeah, but I mean, if I in your shoes looking back, I'd be like, I was actually a lot stronger than I give myself credit for, because you did. I mean, no one finds it easy to move overseas. There's a glamorous,
Yeah.
and the glamour around it. There's the, back in those days, Facebook, but the Instagram, Facebook, the TikTok, the impression that people give out is very different from the day-to-day reality, no matter where you are in the world, I think. And I think you were very strong in everything you've done, because you could have just dropped the bag and just said, I feel really sorry for myself. I'm not going to get another job. I'm going to sit in the corner and sob for a bit. I'm just going to, go out to the pub every night.
Yeah.
But instead you decided to move overseas. You decided to get another job when you got here. You just kept driving and driving and driving forward.
Yeah.
You've obviously, done NLP as a way of, I guess, addressing some of the issues that you've identified. So, I mean, you've got to give yourself a lot of credit, I think.
Thank you.
But what do you think has driven you all the way along to make these sort of conscious, I guess, positive decisions to help yourself out?
Yeah, I think what has driven me all the way along, I mean, definitely there have been massive moments of confusion and really not knowing what to do. That
Yeah.
first year felt very, very messy to me. But then growth is always messy. It's never straightforward, and it's never a complete picnic. I think I've always been a very determined individual. Like I said, I alluded to the fact that I've been through various different things as a child. I grew up in a very independent environment as well. I'm an only child. My mother was very unwell throughout most of my childhood. She passed away very suddenly as well when I was a teenager. So there's certain things that have always made me very driven. I'm very determined to just always move forwards. So yeah, I think it's something that is deep rooted. I think the interesting thing is that there was always a very conflicting part of my personality, though. So even though I would put myself forward and I would drive myself forward, I would never actually do so with that much confidence as well, because again, different things that had happened to me when I was younger. I didn't have any belief in myself. I just had sheer determination. And so that's been the real key change, I would say, over the last, so what? I mean, my personal journey really started when I moved to Dubai. So that's like nearly 11 years ago. Looking back at that individual, I had no self-confidence. I didn't really understand who I was. I knew that I was very determined, but I couldn't have told you why, really.
Yeah.
I could have had a guess, but I couldn't have pinpointed it to certain things. So it's been very, very fundamental part of my journey. And I actually stayed in corporate for another 7 years, I think, here. And so it was only really a couple of years ago that I actually had the confidence to step away from corporate and think, no, actually, I'm going to try and do something for myself.
Yeah, tell
Set
us a
up a
bit more
business.
about that. So you
Yeah.
you had the corporate life. You decided to change. What did you do? Because it's been quite a sea change.
Yeah. So, okay. Nothing's ever a short story with me. This is the thing.
That's why we've got all the time in the world.
Yeah. So, I actually wanted to leave corporate in 2019, and I did. I left my job, but unfortunately, my husband got made redundant at the end of 2019, and you can imagine that was just going into COVID. And at that time, our visas were dependent on his job, so we had to go. Both of us had to go out and look for work because we needed a visa and we needed a salary, we needed an income coming in. And I was the person that found a job. So I was the one that was working through COVID, fortunately, and I continued to work in that role for another 3 years. 3 years? Yes. But it was always I always knew that I wanted to go off and set up my own business, and I knew that I wanted to do something a little bit more creative. I've always been into fashion. I've always been into styling. I've always been into interiors. And these were things that I was interested in even as a kid, but it just wasn't really encouraged. And I don't mean that in a negative, poor me sense. It just wasn't for some reason. But, anyone who's known me for a long time or seen me on socials and stuff like that, they would go, oh, yeah, she's always, stylish and she's into this and she's into that. And I thought, well, maybe I do something with that. So I started to study fashion styling, and I studied a few different credentials before I left corporate. And then I left my last corporate job, and I decided I worked as a stylist for a little bit whilst I was sort of building out the brainchild of my business. And I wanted to merge mindset coaching with styling. And so I went out to market. But a lot of what I was communicating about was a lot of the personal trauma that I had gone through. And so a lot of my clients that I was attracting had gone through these similar kind of traumatic experiences. So the coaching work that I was developing out was almost building like therapy style relationships, ongoing coaching relationships. And I did that for about maybe 8-9 months, and then I actually met, sorry, this is going to be a bit woo now, but I met my energy healer at the time.
Oh, energy healer. Okay.
Yeah, who I just saw yesterday actually for another session. But she said, you're leaking energy, and she said it's something to do with the coaching that you're delivering. And I actually fought back because I said, look, I've done coaching for years. I've done it as part of my corporate job. I know how to protect my energy and all that kind of jazz. And so I debated it with her, and then I got out and I sat in the car and I was like, oof, actually, I feel like she might be right. So that was one of the catalysts for me to sit there and look at my business. And actually, I'd sort of stepped away from the creative side, and it just wasn't moving in the direction that I had envisaged. So I started to wind down the relationships that I had at that point. And then, I took a step back throughout last year. I started to study interior design because that was something that I'd always wanted to do. And I did a little bit of real estate consulting as well, from a relationship perspective, just to kind of bring a little bit of cash in, but whilst I was studying and just trying to figure out what I was going to do. And so now the business that I'm going back out to market with is, so the interior design piece is one hat that I wear. So focus very much on identity, because the one thing that I kept talking about with my coaching was the topic of identity. And like I say, it's really important to me. It's something that I struggled with my entire life, and really became apparent to me when I first moved here, and all of the different transitions and things like that, and the different identity transitions we go through, learning to be in a state of flow when it comes to your identity. So this was a really important message for me to continue in my work, but I just didn't want to do it in the capacity that I was. So I now weave that into interior design. So whether I'm designing on the residential side, obviously designing around the client's personal identity, and also on the commercial side, designing around brand identity as well. And from that perspective, I can also put my old HR hat on. I worked at a strategic HR leadership level, so I understand, the role that culture plays in performance, and all of that kind of sense of accountability and ownership of the culture and the brand and things like that plays a huge role in performance. So it's all very, very interconnected, and that includes your environment as well. So that's one piece that I do. And then I've also worked on an identity-based framework as well. So what we were talking about very briefly earlier at the start, and how identity is fundamentally, is like a blueprint essentially for how you live your life. It's so interconnected. So if you have a really strong hold on who you are and a true understanding of yourself, it impacts your beliefs, it impacts how you behave, it impacts the decisions that you make, it impacts the level of self-trust that you have, your capability of making decisions, the actions you take, how you express yourself. And that is something that I will work with leaders around, but also I will add the styling piece on as well, because it impacts personal style too. So several different hats, but that's what I'm doing now.
So how do people find that identity? You've obviously worked through a number of different not experiments, but you've gone through a lot of different experiences, moved countries, worked different jobs, different sectors. You've run your own company now, and it's quite unique, I think, that you are a personal stylist as well as I guess like a brand stylist, as well as a designer, interior designer.
Yeah.
So maybe you'll change your identity again or recognize a different identity, but you've done a lot of work on discovering your own identity. How do other people find their identity, do you think?
I think, first of all, there's an awareness around the subject of identity, and there's a consciousness level. And often it happens in a similar kind of way that it has to me. You start to feel uncomfortable with things that feel normal. That's the thing, right? So you continue doing something that your identity should be used to. But what you don't necessarily understand is that you're going through a transition, you're going through a shift, and your identity is somehow evolving. And it is important to see it as that. It's evolution. It's being in a state of constant flow with your identity, so it doesn't feel like it's daunting. It doesn't feel like it's this huge transformation and shift. It doesn't have to shake every single part of your life. So it's understanding that is a concept and recognizing when that's actually happening. Most people don't necessarily recognize that it's happening. It just starts to happen. So that's where the level of discomfort actually happens. So understanding that as a concept, I would say, is an initial kind of first step. And then it's really trying to explore and understand the reasons why that might be happening. And often that's based on current circumstances, but then it could also be based on a transition of beliefs, core values, which does actually impact us. So our values change depending on where we are at every single stage of our life. It could be that certain things are catching up with us as well. So it could be going back and revisiting our timeline to understand where certain events have triggered us to cause us to be behaving in a certain way that we're now experiencing, that we're now uncomfortable with. So yeah, that's a kind of high level explanation, I'd say.
So I think at least at the beginning of your journey, you realize a lot of stuff in hindsight, looking back. And then now it sounds like you're more in the flow. I think you mentioned flow a few times where you're
Yeah,
recognizing, the evolution of your identity as it happens.
yeah.
Tell us a bit more about this concept of flow, because to be honest, I'm quite a pragmatic sort of black and white kind of person. So it does sound a bit woo woo to me, and probably some of the listeners on here are, in professional services, but we think quite we don't think probably in as much flow as we should. So tell us a bit more about the concept of flow.
So the concept of flow, I mean, maybe it's the word that sounds a little bit woo, but we're in an ever state of evolution, basically. So that could be another way of articulating it, and it means the same thing. Our identity is constantly shifting. We grow older, we change jobs, we get made redundant, we have children, we have breakups, we have all these different things that happen to us, and it means that our identity is constantly shifting. All of those things that I've named as well are quite big events, and there are lots of little different events that happen to us as well. So it's just getting used to the fact that we're not always going to be that same person. So it enables us to get a little bit more comfortable with the fact that things will shift, and also being able to allow us to go back in and have that sense of introspection as well. Recognize when something's happening and think, okay, this feels uncomfortable, or this feels different. What's going on here? And like I say, it just enables us to start that kind of thinking process around, is something shifting or not? Do I need to change something? Has somebody crossed my boundaries, or, whatever the case may be.
So it's a bit about recognizing your feelings, recognizing something's is shifting.
Self-awareness. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's building that level of self-awareness. It's building a deep understanding with who you are, understanding what your passions are, understanding what your values are, what your belief system looks like as well. We often don't realize just how much our belief system is actually impacting us, and often in quite a negative way as well. We build out beliefs from the age of like 5, 6, 7, and we continue to keep building all of those layers of different beliefs from different events that we experience, different influential people in our lives, especially when we're children. So we start to layer on all of these beliefs as well. And our brains will always look for the reaffirming beliefs. So if you've developed something that was a negative belief at the age of 6 or 7, something happens to you at 10 and that reaffirms it, that belief turns up a level. Then something else happens to you at 15, and so on and so forth. And we'll look for those, and we'll discount the things that are potentially going against that belief. So we'll kind of really hold on to that. So it's understanding your belief system as well, and understanding how that can impact you.
And from what you said, it sounds like other people have a big influence on probably on your beliefs as a child, but also on your identity. How do you draw the line between your own identity and what other people have I guess taught you or imposed on you?
Yeah, I think it's really like I was just trying to think of how to articulate it. The one key thing I would say is just learning to kind of self-interrogate where those beliefs are coming from. How do you draw the line between your own identity and somebody else's? Even now, you can be influenced by somebody. And they might not have played a massive role in your life, but maybe there's something about them. They might be a boss, or they might have characteristics that remind you of a father figure or something like that. And it's about being able to ask the question, is this my belief, or is this somebody else's belief? Is this something that somebody wants me to do, or is this something that I want to do? So just being able to ask that key critical question, I'd say.
So do you think most professionals consciously think about their identity, or does it tend to just bubble away under the surface?
I think it's a bit of a mixture, really, because I think it's very person dependent. I think that a lot of professionals may have gone through certain things in their personal lives that have caused them to think about their identity. I think the thing that we don't necessarily think about as professionals, if I put my old corporate hat back on, is how much our role, the role of identity actually plays in our corporate lives, in our professional lives. That's something that's very key, but I think a lot of people don't necessarily realise that level of authenticity, and just how strong a role that plays.
And is that, I guess, you mentioned that in hindsight, you should have left corporate life earlier. And what were the signs, I guess, that in hindsight you've learned were pointing towards that?
What were the signs? I think that I just simply wasn't enjoying it as much
Yeah,
as I was previously. Um, it didn't carry so much weight in my identity. Like I said earlier, when I was in London, very much I was a corporate girl. When I was here, it didn't feel like that was a part of my identity. Um, yeah, I think looking back, I just didn't feel as bought in to that corporate career as I had done back in the UK.
fair enough. And I guess you've noticed that. Well, we've noticed that the identity tends to be triggered, or particularly become visible during change.
Yeah.
What triggers do you see most often in the people you work with in professional life?
If I think about one client, I think her trigger was she had been promoted. And I think she realised at that point that it was. She actually didn't realise it at that point, but I think it became more apparent to her that she was playing very small in certain conversations. So definitely, I think the point of promotion is something that heightens our awareness. We spoke about the fact that there were certain individuals that would make her feel a certain way. And so when we looked at those individuals, actually, there were certain traits that connected back to individuals that played a very key role in certain events that had happened in her childhood. There were other events as well that had led her to believe that she was also a very shy person as well. But when we talked about these kind of behavior traits, she was like, yeah, actually I've always been like this if I think about it, but getting that promotion was the thing that really raised her awareness to it. So I'd say promotion is definitely one of those. Taking on that level of increased responsibility, but dealing with different people around different tables as well, I think helps to expose if you're feeling that way.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different triggers. So you talked about a change in job, relationships. I think seem to be in there, whether it's a husband or a wife or children or brothers or sisters or family. But
Yeah.
have you seen that a lot with the people that you've worked with? That it's who they're in a relationship influences that person's identity or has a big impact on their identity and how they see themselves.
Yeah, it can do. But this is where the strength of your own identity also plays a role. As I said before, we were talking, I can't remember what we were talking about earlier, but things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And you're also very much in control of the things that are happening. So, in that instance, if someone is having a major influence on your identity, it's probably because you're not being strong enough. And this sounds a little bit confrontational, which I really don't mean it to, but it's probably because you're not necessarily stepping into your own identity. Either you're not confident in knowing what that looks like, or you're just not confident enough to step into it. But different people can absolutely play a role in that.
So how have you helped people to come to that realization?
It's usually through talking through the scenarios in exactly that kind of way. Allowing people to understand, is it them that's kind of influencing them, or is it the fact that they're not speaking out? More often than not, it's the people that are not speaking out. Just like in the example that I gave. So, you know, she was somebody who wasn't actually speaking out, but that was something about her. So we had to go through and, you know, work through various different things that she had experienced. And it wasn't just things in her childhood as well. So there were things that, for example, she hadn't really celebrated any of the successes that she'd had in her career. So she was also hindering herself an awful lot. She hadn't stopped to look at the various different points where she'd been promoted in the past to congratulate herself. She kind of just went straight into the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, which we're all very guilty of doing. So it's being able to explore all of those different things as well. And for her, it was really understanding why she felt that she was shy. So that was the one thing. Being able to go back and disprove that belief that she had held, but also being able to then look at all of the different events that she had been discounting in her career and explaining, you know, why these actually disprove once again that she's not shy and she can hold her own, but also tapping into her passions as well. So then for her, she was able to get to know herself on a deeper level, not only understand that she's not a shy individual, but also giving her the understanding of her passions, so that then she's fueled by that as well. So she has the confidence to be able to speak out, but she's fueled by understanding why she actually wants to speak out.
Shy is an interesting one because I think it's when you reflect on it, when I'm reflecting on it right now, but it's a word that is used quite often with children, isn't it? To talk about those who are a bit socially awkward or having a difficulty in a situation, whether it's with family or friends or strangers, I guess. But do you just think about the example you just gave? She wasn't shy. What was the characteristics instead that existed within her? What was her identity, I guess, that, you know, meant she wasn't actually shy? What was she?
Well, again, I guess it comes back down to labeling, doesn't it? So for
Yeah.
her, she wasn't shy, but she became confident in her ability to be able to speak out. She became confident in understanding what her values were, what her passions were. You know, we talked through several different scenarios about the things that she actually wanted to speak out about and examining why she was very passionate about that. I think shyness is a label, and
Yeah.
it's you know, it's something that many of us are labelled with as well. Like, I remember being labelled around being shy when I was younger, but actually I could be very extrovert, introvert. So people didn't really understand it. So I don't necessarily think that it's almost about replacing one label with another. It's just helping someone to be able to understand how do they break away from that label.
So in what situations then were you introvert versus an extrovert? Where
Who,
did you feel
me
comfortable?
personally,
Yeah.
or
For example.
um, yeah. So again, so I think where am I, an introvert versus an extrovert? So when I would be, so I'm an only child, so I could be, and still can, if I'm on my own and I'm working on my own and I'm very, very focused, then if you suddenly had to put me in a room full of people, I would probably come across as quite shy. But because I've suddenly gone into my own little world. Whereas there's another version of me that if you put me into that same room, I can be completely different. So I think when I was younger, the reason why I was labelled shy is sometimes I would be put in a situation where it was almost a bit of a shock for me. And then other times I'd be put in a situation where I'd just run off and I'd go and play with people, or I'd go and talk to people, or whatever it was. So yeah, I think that's probably why if I've ever been labelled shy, it's because of that.
Yes. What were the difference in those situations? I'm just thinking about myself as well because I
Yeah.
was labeled shy as a kid. And
Okay.
then when you get labeled shy, then you think of yourself as shy. You
Yeah.
know, you just have that in your head, and it almost becomes an excuse sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but in hindsight, it's probably just being put in situations where I just wasn't comfortable, and so went into myself.
Yeah.
Um, but there's other situations where it'd be labeled the opposite of shy because, well, for me, for example, I don't like being in big rooms full of people and things like that. Obviously you do it, but it's not very comfortable. If
Yeah.
I'm one on one or with a small group of people, then I'm much more comfortable. I'm far more, I think, outgoing.
Yeah.
And I think that probably applies to a lot of people and a lot of professionals, especially.
I think that's where the labeling can really hinder you, because in that
Mm.
situation, if you asked yourself why on one occasion you can go into a room full of people and feel quite comfortable with it and other times not, then actually that's when you can start to almost give yourself a little bit of a break about it and say, do you know what, maybe it's just because I'm tired, or actually I'm just not really in the mood today. But the fact that I'm still turning up, and the fact that I'm still being, I'm still here and I'm still approaching people and stuff like that, then good on you for doing that. I think that we all experience that, but that's where we can have a tendency to fall back on those labels. So if I think about that client example, that's where she was doing that. And so
Mm.
for her, she was looking at certain characters around the room and thinking that she was shy. But actually, like I said, like some of those people were reminding her of other people that she'd experienced when she was younger. So then if you think about the definition of shy, that's a label that she's broad brushing on herself, but there were certain characters that were bringing that out of her. So it can't necessarily be that she's just shy. So this is an example of where if you give yourself a label, or you're trying to disprove to yourself that you're not shy, actually replacing it with another label isn't necessarily helpful. And I'll give you a personal example of this. So I have always been somebody that's had to speak publicly in my corporate career. Different jobs at different levels. So, sometimes I might be in a job where I didn't have to do it that much. Other times I would have to do it quite a lot. But nonetheless, I always did it, and it never really impacted me that way, or in any way. I then became an entrepreneur, and I really, really struggled with the idea
Mm.
of getting up and talking. And it came out of nowhere, and it hit me really, really hard as well. And so there was a level of introspection that I needed to do to understand where that had come from. But if you'd asked me, so if I tried to replace that word with confidence, and even if you'd said to me, but Carina, you were confident at speaking 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, it wouldn't have made any difference, because in that moment, I'm not confident. So my rational brain is fighting back. So what you're trying to do is just reverse that feeling of not feeling confident and understanding what is the thing that is impacting me now, and going back to that event so that you can then start to talk to that event, start to reframe and reverse whatever's happening with that event, so that then that feeling in the future, that feeling that was happening to me in that moment, was suddenly replaced. So it's not necessarily about inputting a positive or overlaying a positive label, because your rational brain, your logical brain will fight with that essentially.
We're all quite fragile, aren't we? Really,
Yeah.
it's there is very little. There's a very small line between waking up and going out and outwardly being confident and feeling inwardly confident
Yeah.
as well, versus just something small that can happen during that day that triggers something that's happened in the past, or and just knocks you,
Yeah.
and then it's gone, and you've lost it. You've lost it for a while.
But that's the thing. And if you can really get a hold on yourself and you understand why these things happen, it's being able to recognize that something's happening to you. And even if you can't figure out why in that moment, that pattern interrupt is everything. Because if somebody says something to you and you allow yourself to spiral, you'll go into your next call, you'll go into your next meeting, and every single thing will be shrouded by whatever has allowed you to go into that negative space and that negative mindset. If you can literally interrupt that, recognize it's happening, and go, okay, that's something I need to look at, put it in the review bin in your brain, and then come back to it later, think about why it's impacted you that way, but don't think about it in that moment. But I was having a really good day before that, so I'm going to continue having that really good day. That's a really key skill to have.
That sounds quite challenging, but very good, like a
Yeah,
very good modus operandi.
yeah,
Um, because I guess you don't want to get too introspective in that time. You don't have the choice if you've got to, I say jump on stage might be extreme, but if you're doing public speaking and you all of a sudden have this, you don't want
Yeah.
to then that to get in the way of when you're about to step on stage, or
Yeah.
even as small as you're about to have a call with another person.
Yeah.
You don't really want that to come across. So getting out of that immediate mindset is quite a challenge. So how you helped people, or how should people change that mindset quite quickly and think, okay, I'm going to put this aside for now, come back to it tonight.
Yeah. So something that I personally do, and I will always recommend to anyone for that matter, is being able to step into yourself in the moment. And you can practice that through things that are not necessarily in the moment, but through things like meditation. And if you struggle with meditation, then I would strongly suggest looking at breath work. Because that is something that takes you into that meditative state, but you also have something to focus on as well. So again, thinking about professionals with very busy minds, sometimes, and I know this as well, the thought of meditating to me 10 years ago, or doing yoga or something like that, it would be like, I haven't got time for that, just to sit and do nothing. I couldn't get on board with it. Doing something like breath work, it gives you something to actually focus on, but you still go into that meditative state. And that's something that helps you to build that close connection with yourself as well. And it's amazing. You start to do something like that, you can start to become more in tune with yourself, and you start to realize when something is impacting your mindset throughout the day. That's one thing. Definitely things like journaling as well, reflective work. And I know that a lot of people talk about journaling, and again, maybe it sounds a little bit woo and, have I really got time for that? But actually, if you were getting to the end of your working week and you didn't look back at the things that went well, and you didn't look back at the things that hadn't gone well, how would you know how to move forwards into that next week? How would you set up your to-do list? How would you know the things to improve upon, or the things that needed more work, the things that you'd done a really good job with that you could congratulate yourself on and still move positively into that next week? Journaling is a little bit like that, but for the mind. So you can then sit there and think, okay, well, how did that conversation go? Okay, I didn't deal with that very well. Why did I not deal with that very well? So it allows you to then reflect on certain moments that you might not have then thought about. That in itself builds that skill, the one that we're talking about, where you can catch yourself in the moment and go, my goodness, Carina's just rubbed me up the wrong way. But do you know what? I'm just going to put it in that review bin and then come back to it later. That helps you to build up that skill set as well.
I could see the value in that, actually. Breath work and journaling and all that sort of stuff's always seemed a bit, I don't know about this. In my mind, do I have time for this?
Yeah.
But I have been trying. If you just start to get stressed about something, just to take a minute, just to take a few breaths, it does actually work.
Yeah.
And allows you to, I guess, compartmentalize what you're thinking, so
Yeah.
you can deal with it later.
Yeah.
And I guess knowing that you're going to be able to come back to it later and not reflect too hard in that moment when you've got to move on, you've got to keep going,
Yeah.
is probably quite helpful.
Yeah. Definitely.
Let's talk about your identity now, I guess, and the move you've taken with the interior design slash, I guess, personal identity. You do, I think, design interiors based on the personal identity of the clients that you work with,
Yes.
both for homes and for commercial spaces.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so two different sides. So the residential side is obviously designing a home. Well, actually, it could be based around the individual that's going to move into that home, or it could be for an investment purpose as well. So that there's two different aspects there to think about. Obviously, for the person that's come to you, it's about understanding what does their identity look like? What do they want their home to feel like? What kind of energy do they want to bring to the home? So there's aesthetics, like you would sit down and say, okay, is your style more boho? Is it more modern? Is it more contemporary? A lot of people don't know what styles they like, and this comes down to personal style and interior design as well. Lots of people don't necessarily know what styles they like. So then again, it's about exploring, it's about what's the word I'm looking for? Experimenting with different styles, thinking about different color tones and things like that. But yeah, the mood, the energy, thinking about the kind of lifestyle that they have, thinking about how each person might conflict with the other as well, because obviously couples don't necessarily always want the same thing as well. So yeah, there's lots of different components that would play a role in that kind of scenario. For an investor, it's about being able to create a space that is not overwhelming with one particular identity, but equally isn't a complete neutral blank canvas either. So that's more about focusing in on creating a story. And then on the commercial side, we're thinking more about brand identity. We're thinking more about culture. What does the workspace look like? Should there be certain breakout areas? Yes, all that kind of stuff on the functionality side. But how can you really enable your brand to really resonate with individuals? How can they live and breathe the brand through the environment that they're operating in every single day? So yeah, very different depending on the client type. But yeah, that's how you can infuse the identity piece in interiors.
So where do most interior designers start then? If they're not necessarily thinking about, or do they all start with identity? Or how where do you start? I mean,
I
I
haven't
wouldn't have a
heard
clue
any
what I like and
interior.
don't like.
Yeah, so I think I haven't heard any interior designers talk specifically about identity. I think identity has become a bit of a buzzword over the last year, but I was talking about it when I started my coaching a couple of years ago. I think how I like to differentiate myself is obviously I understand people and I've worked with people for so many years and in different capacities. So I'd like to think that I get to know people on a different level, and I get to know companies on a different level, so that I can really build something out that does really suit their identity. So I haven't heard any other interior designer talk about this. Maybe I'll create a wave of them coming through. That would be fun. So yeah, but where does an interior designer start? I mean, obviously with the client. So, actually sitting down and understanding the client is a big role. But it depends on how much detail somebody goes into. That would be down to the individual designer. But it's
So where do you
understanding
start then? How are you
the...
different? Just thinking about your approach, I guess, rather than thinking generally. Then, um, where do you start? I guess, given you've got more of a focus on identity,
Yeah.
how what's your process?
Yeah. Mine, I would say, is really getting to understand the client on a different level. I have a number of different touch points that I would have with the client before we would even start the work together. And just building that really kind of robust level of relationship. Like I say, if I was working with a company, getting to know the company on a different level, understanding not just the branding, but spending time with different people within the organisation as well, so that we can really understand what does the culture look like. So that would involve sitting with the marketing team as well as the HR team as well, which I don't necessarily, I'm thinking about my old HR capacity, I never had an interior designer come and talk to me about that. What does the design of the office look like? And I'd actually been through a few different office designs actually. So just getting to know the client on a broader and deeper level.
It sounds like if it's commercial, then you mentioned HR. I guess HR will have come out with one perspective. You might have the marketing team who will come at it with a different perspective, more of a brand perspective, perhaps. And then you've probably got the CFO or the finance team who are looking at it from a budgetary perspective. And
Yeah,
I guess you've got to try and get everybody on the same page.
yeah,
And I guess the corporate experience must come in handy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was a big part of my corporate life was always getting people together, trying to find solutions as well. So I've always been a big kind of solutions person. Um, Not sitting around and moaning about a problem, which I know sometimes happens in the corporate world. There's meeting after meeting about this that, and the other, and then you meet again to discuss it all again. And I was always a bit more sort of driven towards the solution and how can we discuss this here and now, and then walk away with some actual actions that we can all take away. How can we change this? How can we move, even if it's a fraction of a step forward? So yeah, definitely plays a role.
So, how is identity expressed through style and presence and physical space?
It's how we choose to express it. Um, Through style, again, it's about being in touch with that identity, who we are. As I said before, most of my clients, in fact, that I'd worked with on the styling side, a key reason why they were struggling with the concept of styling themselves was because they didn't actually understand what kind of styles they liked. And so that's going through that kind of more exploratory process, starting to play around with different styles. Again, something that I spoke about earlier as well, everything is about applying a growth mindset. So styling, a lot of people, when you talk about styling, they say, oh, well, I couldn't possibly try that on. And you say, well, why? And they say, oh, well, it wouldn't suit me. You say, okay, well, what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't? Then you take it into a changing room and you put it on and you go, it doesn't suit me. Is that not okay? And then you start to think to yourself, okay, well, why didn't it suit me? Well, it was probably a bit too short for me. Okay, so now I won't go for things that are that short. So everything that you do in life is a learning experience. And so that might sound like quite a small one, but again, it's just how do you apply a growth mindset? How do you move further outside of your comfort zone so that you can start to build up that understanding of what your style is? And so, yeah, an expression of style is being able to understand what kind of style you like, what expresses you best, what do you enjoy wearing. Are you somebody who's a very mood dependent person? I was having this conversation this morning at the BCCD breakfast that we were at, and someone said to me, what are your colours? And I said, don't really have any colours, because I would just wear whatever colour I would want, and it's very much dependent on my mood or dependent on where I'm going or whatever it may be. But not everybody is like that. So it's understanding yourself in that way and how you want to express yourself through style.
Because I've seen you sometimes wearing a hat, for example. I've seen you not wearing a hat. I've seen you blonde. I've seen you brunette. So you've obviously decided.
You haven't known me for that long either. Excuse me.
So you've obviously you're quite mood dependent. How does that apply to a building? I guess to a house or to a commercial premise where you maintain maybe pushing people to take a little bit of risk and express themselves in something that's not neutral, but still within their comfort zone.
I think, look, it depends on the client. So let's talk about commercial spaces. If it doesn't make sense to go, particularly out there, it's not in keeping with the brand, it's not in keeping with the culture, you've got to assess why you're doing these things. If it is, then great. If you're, I don't know, designing a tropical rainforest, then having bright colours, having, bold patterns and things like that, it's naturally going to work well with the brand and the type of client that you're trying to attract into that environment. If you're working in a bank, then, having zebra print chairs and things like that is obviously not going to work well. So in the commercial space, I guess there are certain parameters that you do operate in. From a personal perspective, again, it's understanding why you're doing something. So if somebody says that they really like a very neutral space, but they want to introduce pops of colour, again, you kind of have to test that theory with mood boards, concept boards, to see if they actually like that. Because the other thing as well is that you would go around and assess somebody's current environment A, because that might be the space that you're actually redesigning anyway, but B, just to understand what do their current tastes look like. If they don't go for it on the mood board, on the concept board, then maybe it's more of an aspiration rather than a deep intrinsic need to start expressing that colour. There might be a particular reason as well. So there might be, I don't know, something like a link back to their heritage as to why they want to express that colour. So it might be very personal for them, but still they don't necessarily like the visual of that. So then you start to work with that and go, okay, well maybe we can do it, but on a smaller degree. So yeah, it really does depend on the client.
So what does a client's taste or a person's taste say about them?
I think it says who they are, as in, I think it depends, because for everybody else, how can I say this? Everybody's different. So you might meet somebody who has a very similar dress sense to me. As you know, I can be quite versatile in the things that I wear. I can wear very different things on different days. And you happen to meet somebody that has a similar way of dressing to me. Now, for me, that's been built around the fact that I personally worked in corporate for so long. So I like to play around with how I express myself in different ways, because I always felt like I had to dress in one particular way, especially think back to London in the 2000s, and we were all wearing our TM Lewin suits, and that was it.
Yeah.
So
one
for
size
me,
fits all.
going nuts in Topshop at the weekend and playing around with all these different things was a way of expressing myself. That other person that you meet that looks like a carbon copy of me might have learnt to have done that through her childhood, and maybe that's how her mum used to dress. So again, we're expressing ourselves for different reasons, but it's still, this is me and this is her, but it looks the same on the surface. Have I explained that very well?
No, you have. I think, and I just think, how can people express themselves in a? It's interesting. You talked about the TM Lewin suit. I lived in London, similar time to what you were talking about, and yeah, you could just go down to TM Lewin and grab as I said, one style fits all, more probably the more one size fits all for a man anyway. So having worked with a lot of in professional services, a lot tends to be, especially for men, we all look the same. We're all wearing a similar suit, maybe it's different color tie. How can you sort of express your individual style? I guess as a male and a female, but how can you I guess look professional but express your individual style a bit as well?
I think now it's very different. I think back then it was very hard, in the sense that there was a certain way of dressing, and it wasn't really acceptable. I know you still have a dress code that's tied into your HR policy and things like that now, but there's a lot more creativity that you see. So I think it's learning what you're comfortable with as well. So I think my final days of being in corporate, people would wear suits with trainers, but because it was quite stylish to do that. Other people wouldn't. So finding your level of comfort, if you want to introduce pops of colour, but you don't think that wearing a red suit is going to go down very well. But then, I would always test boundaries. So I would always say to somebody, wear the red suit, see what happens, If it really doesn't go down very well, then, you won't wear it again. But then maybe that's not the right environment for you if it's not. If you're not able to express yourself, then maybe it's not the right place for you to be in the first place. There needs to be some kind of disclaimer with that as well. If anyone's listening to that and goes, right, okay, this isn't the right place for me. But you know what I mean? That's where you start to look at things a little bit more deeply as well.
Yeah, I think there is. It's really hard to find that boundary between what's what's acceptable, I guess, in a professional environment, how you want to express yourself personally, and then what's culturally acceptable as well, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's also true as well. That's a big consideration, particularly over here as well.
I guess that's why we all need a Carina Harvey in our lives. I might have to come to you for some advice because I'm very boring. I have no idea what my style is. Comfortable, probably. Practical. That probably doesn't impress everybody. Okay, so I know that 2026 is a year of reinvention for you.
Yes.
What are you relaunching in 2026? What does it look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, what it looks like is basically going back out to the market with my business. So wearing two different, very different hats. Well, not very different hats actually, because everything is kind of intertwined. The identity carries through in the interior design work. It also carries through in the identity work as well. I have plans to hopefully relaunch my podcast as well. Want to put a bit of a twist on that as well. So I had a podcast that I had launched back when I launched my coaching, and it was based around identity. Then it was called All Things Identity, but we filmed it in a studio, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm presenter trained, and I've basically had to interview people for my entire corporate career. So I get a big kick out of talking to people. But I did one season and I thought, I want to do something a little bit different with it, and I don't know what that looks like. And then obviously I sort of put a pause on my coaching business. So naturally I did the same with the podcast. So that is something that I would like to launch this year, and or I have a plan to, but I'm just sort of putting the final touches to what exactly that's going to look like. But yeah, so going back out with my identity work, interior design. I'm working on a residential project at the moment, which is a complete reconfiguration of the space as well, which is extremely fun. And it's an investor project as well, so it's very interesting from the identity side of things. So yeah, these are a few things that are bubbling away right now.
Looking forward to seeing the finishing touches on all of these, Carina.
Thank you very much.
So people like the sound of your approach. How can they get in touch? How can they find you?
Yeah, so I think anywhere. I'm happy to share my number and email and all that kind of jazz. But if they want to have a look at me on socials, then I'm on LinkedIn, Carina Harvey, and Instagram, Carina Harvey Official. I have a YouTube channel as well, which is Carina Harvey Official. My website is carinaharvey.com, but it's actually currently under reconstruction. But again, with finishing touches, so that should be live hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Now we're looking forward to seeing the new podcast that reflects your identity.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot from today. So thank you very much for joining us on Muhami Matters, Carina.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure.
To our audience, thank you to you as well for joining us. I think today's conversation was a reminder that identity really does underpin everything that we make. Every decision we make as professionals, both from leadership to business development to reinventing ourselves and personal expression. And I think anything I've learned from Carina is that you do need to understand, with a bit of introspection, I guess, why you're making a decision in a certain way. And is this for you or is this for somebody else? So putting yourself at the center which is kind of the opposite of what we are sometimes told when we need to think about other people. So think about number one. I'm going to take that one away. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your network. For more insights and support, visit muhami.ae. Connect with me at CJA Consulting. I'm Chris Adams. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered. Thank you for joining us on Muhami Matters. If you found today's episode valuable, subscribe and connect with me to stay updated. Join me again soon as we continue to bring you credible insights, practical strategies, and trusted advice to empower your professional journey. I'm Chris Adams. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered.